Okay, so good afternoon. I apologize for the slow delay, but thank you all for joining us this afternoon as we move into fiscal year 17 and kicking off the new data collection system. We all celebrated heavily the elimination of the caregiver interview form, but in its place, we needed to put in a system for collecting that data that we hope will be slightly easier once we get over the hump of learning the system and forms. So this initial where that we're having today is to just go through the forms, and there are a couple of points where we'll have some questions for you as well to get some feedback on if the way that the form is considered timed makes sense to you, because with the new benchmark, some of the timing did change. And we're also, recommending that you have. Our purpose today is to go through these forms so that you can start to familiarize yourself with them. And one of the really great things moving into fiscal year 17 is the requirement to collect a lot of information via interview has kind of gone away. Much of the information you probably do collect already in other formats. And these forms are to help you collect them in the way that the data system that we're going to be rolling training out on in a few weeks will be out as. So this is just a way for you to organize that information. Today, the room, this is Dot at MPHI. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with me. And I have been here for you to support you in the information that you need to fulfill your reporting obligations for MHVI as well as FY17. With me here is
Carrie Soroka. Those of you that I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, I work with Brenda here at MPHI on the data team. I do a lot of work with the data set and the analysis.
So Carrie has been working hard to distill the new benchmarks to digestible pieces for us all in making sense of how we would actually collect a lot of this information in the field and what are reasonable measures to ask for. And she is integral to the building of the online data system that will be rolling out to you. So today we're going to just briefly, because we do have some teams coming on board who were not part of the MHVI group before, but are being funded under Michigan funds and are being brought into our circle of data collection and reporting. We're just going to briefly touch on the information that Julia Heaney presented in August about the changes to the benchmarks that necessitated the change in the way that we assist you in collecting and compiling this information. And then we're going to roll into introducing the new form that, again, it's just a different way to organize things into the already. And then, as always, if you have any questions as we go along, please do ask. MPHI thrives on your questions, as do the other teams involved. It's always this is a good opportunity to ask questions that can provide clarification, or if it's something that perhaps we haven't thought of because we do not ourselves provide PAT or EHS services, perspective is a little bit different. Something that maybe we envisioned one way doesn't necessarily work. And then we'll talk a little bit about the next steps as we move into FY17 for your particular group. Are there questions before we get started? Okay. Terry is also moderating the chat, so if you have questions as we go along, you can put it up there for everyone or direct a question to Terry, and she'll be looking at those as we go along. Just to recap, if you are familiar with the benchmark area of MHVI and by extension the Michigan Home Visiting Initiative that's adopted and is spreading out these benchmarks, improving maternal newborn health, reducing child injuries, abuse, neglect, improvements in school readiness and achievement, reductions in interval violence, improving sufficiency and service. And these are all things that you are do on a daily basis, serving your family. And so these six benchmarks are meant to just be a way to measure those pieces to kind of the bang for the buck that the state and the federal level are getting for investing in expansion of the evidence-based home visiting program. MHVI is here to support you all in making sure that we get the data on these six benchmarks because it is a funding requirement and fund continuation always depends upon these numbers. So we've tried to think about how to do this in a manner that impacts you the least and causes the least repetition. We do need to, as a group, demonstrate that we're achieving outcomes to continue that investment for continued and expanded investment in families and communities like yours. So into FY17 at the federal level, made a lot of changes to the benchmark. There used to be 20-something different measures. There are now 19. There are fewer. However, they're a little more structured. The frames have changed on a couple of things, and we'll talk about that as we go through the form. And if you were able to join the presentation that you did in August and through in detail how those different pieces change. One thing that we'll probably touch on again and again, and you'll notice in FY17 is there's really an increased emphasis on elimination of missing data. So we're going to talk later about how to approach the timing of different things, ensure that you're making sure that you're getting the collection that's asked for. They've also added screening of male primary caregivers, which I think is really great, and recognizes that also are a big piece of this as well. Collecting information about all target children is something that they are phasing in over the next year. So you'll notice that our forms are set to collect information on all the children. You and I can see each other now. I would like to ask, if you're not asking a question directly, that you put your line on mute. There's a bit of background noise. Excellent. Thank you. And then the last bullet is kind of the important one. If you're familiar with the work that we've done with the federal level MHVI grants to this point, they're still evolving. There's still discussions back and forth how things are being collected or should be collected, what the definition is, what HRSA truly wants out of a particular indicator. So our data collection and reporting plans have been approved, but there's still some areas that we're following up on, and we kind of rely on you as well to highlight these questions. There might be gray areas in understanding how a measure has been laid out. So it's possible that some of these pieces will change or that there will be additional guidance. Still evolving, so we're kind of building a ship as we're going. Piece of why we're here today is to roll out the new set of forms. And we're terming these Michigan Home Visiting Initiative Children and Family Level Data System Forms. because we want a name to encapsulate what we're really trying to assist you in collecting to distill and get that report in for you to the funder. So I had sent out earlier today, about an hour ago, the packet of forms that will be used. And today we're just going to focus on the content of the forms, and then in a couple of weeks, after you have some time to look at forms, ask questions, and if needed, we may need to make a couple of tweaks between now and when we roll out the online system that you'll be entering this information into. So today we just wanted to kind of introduce you to the forms, walk you through answer some initial questions, and then, we sit on them for a couple of weeks, maybe test them out in collection before we move to the next step of how do you enter this information into the system. The very first form is what is called the family roster. I'm just going to quickly move to what this looks like. So this is the very first form in the PDF kind of packet that I sent you today. And the first page says family roster at the top. And what you'll see on all of these forms is all of them have home visitor and family ID at the top of the form as well. And all of them have MHVI on them so that you know that this particular form in your file is MHVI. It's not EHS or PAT specific or whatever your model may be. They're meant for the MHVI data collection. So going back to what is in this form. So the family roster form is meant to kind of be the family and new member enrollment form. So this particular form collects enrollment information for the family and all members of the family. For the family, as you have done in the past, you're going to assign IDs to each family and all family members. Because of the way that the system has been built, it's being built with identifiable information in it. So we've done away with the requirement that your ID numbers need to be completely identifiable, so not containing birth dates and such. If you have an ID that your other systems automatically generate that you rely on, and you've been making up an additional ID for us to keep it de-identified, you no longer have to do that going forward because you'll be entering directly into a secure system and keeping these paper forms that we're walking through today with you, your agency. So there won't be what's considered unsafe transit of identifiable information. So we're going to assign IDs to each family and all family members as you have. This form collects demographic information, pregnancy status, insurance status, and housing status. It's collected at enrollment for all family members. You update it as you go along if you add additional family members. So say the family enters with just mom and baby, you would fill out those pieces of the enrollment form. And then perhaps grandma joins later as a second caregiver. You then add her there as well. Another thing to note is we're using the term enrollment, but it's possible that your particular model or your site uses the term intake. Many times these mean the same thing. And what we really mean is you decided that this family meets your eligibility criteria and they are officially going to be starting services in your program. Does that make sense? If you have any questions, feel free to use the chat function. Carrie's monitoring it as we go along. Just to note, enrollment and intake, we at MPHI are using the term interchangeably. But again, it's just looking at that date on which you start to serve family. They're fully in your program. So back to looking at the form itself. With all the forms, there are instructions at the top. So with the family roster, you're looking to complete as much information as you can when the family first in. And if any other member joins later, so say there's additional children, additional caregivers, you would come back and put that information in here as their enrollment. You're going to family information here in the first piece, the family ID. The fund source is important for the different reports that this data have to go into. So if you're a MHVI-funded site, you would check MHVI. You have other types of funding. We've identified 3 that are currently under the MHVI umbrella for data collection. But if you are uncertain about what to check for this particular box for your site, please, for most of you, it will be the MHVI box. If you are ever in question about what box you should check, please call me and I can help you with that. The referral date for when that family was referred to your program, the source of referral, and there's a menu of options here. We ask that you check just one, and there is an other option here as well where you'll be able to put information in. The enrollment date or the intake date, what the term is that your site uses, the address of the family, the number of people, adults and children in the household, including the primary caregiver, all the other adults, and all children, the total monthly income of the household, and language spoken at home, English, Spanish, or other, and you can write whatever that language might be that's in other category on the line. Second page, it gets into information specific to the primary caregiver. So the PCID, they're in their first and last, maiden if applicable, and anywhere we're asking for name, we're asking for their proper name. Because our hope is if we collect proper names and information this way, that we can, to a great extent, limit the amount of information that we ask you in that annual DHS Vital Records Maker poll. It is hope that if we get that information here this way, we want you for that separately, because I know that frankly, that one's a pain. So it's a pain for you, it's a pain for us. So if we can incorporate into this system too, that depends upon us being able to get the proper name. Primary caregiver's date of birth, gender, they're up to the index child, our marital status at enrollment, so at that particular point in time, their pregnancy status at enrollment, if have not given birth yet, if they are prenatal, you would also enter their expected due date here on the line. For this one, you can check all that apply and your ethnicity. Excuse me. And there's a series of 3 questions here for you to answer that are related to the MHVI priority population. Are they, their partner, or of the military or a veteran, yes or no? To the history of abuse, neglect, or have they had interactions with child welfare services as an adult or child? And caregiver, do you have a history of substance abuse or need substance abuse treatment, yes or no? Their level of education, their education status, employed for pay, full-time, part-time, or not employed, if they're looking for work, their living status, and their in status are here. Questions on all of those particular levels so far? Okay. Pretty standard information on demographics that, again, you probably are already collecting in some format in your files. This here moves into additional caregiver information. So you're going to complete this form for each additional caregiver that enrolls in the program. And it runs through essentially the same questions. You have an ID assigned, their name, their date of birth, their gender, their relationship to that index child, marital status, pregnancy status, race, ethnicity, etc. Page gets into information specific to the index child. Index child as well, again, will have their own ID. We will be asking for their first, middle, and last names, and again, those should be the proper names. Birth, gender, race, ethnicity, primary language spoken at home to that target child, insurance status, their usual source of medical care, and their usual source of dental care. Additional pages for other index children that you are serving as well. So here we have index child 2 with the same questions and index child 3 information with the same question.
Wraps up the form. I'm going to jump in for a quick moment and take a brief moment to chat about the insurance status questions. She has on the screen right now the index child information. You can see it's on the right-hand side in the middle. And our options that we're provided in reporting for the federal grants are the 4 that we see here. The insurance coverage, Medicaid CHIP, care, and private other. We don't have the checkbox for please specify and completing them. One of the challenges that we've had in working with data that's been coming in is that when some of the options are written in on the other field, it's difficult still yet to tell which box to put them in, since some plans offer multiple variations. One could be a Medicaid and one could be private. So we're asking for your assistance in trying to find the right checkbox while they're with the family and you have them in front of you to ask those additional follow-up questions. We're going to provide a table of the main insurance coverages we have here in Michigan that will help everybody find classifications for those. So that will be a document that you'll receive in the future, and we'll have it attached to this form as well. We definitely welcome your feedback in this challenge and in meeting this reporting requirement. So if this is something that your teams are struggling with or you'd like some more assistance, please let us know and let Brenda know. We can help you work through that.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, completes the information on the family roster.
This is Sandra. How can I help you?
Enrique, you're still on the webinar.
Sorry.
So as Carrie runs, we're still working on kind of the insurance list here, and this will be updated. So if you have input on that as well, we certainly welcome types of insurance that you see. That type of information would be helpful to us to update this table. Here, the family roster. Then we walked through that family roster form. If you're looking back at this presentation, you'll notice that, and I should have mentioned this earlier, there's a shape and a color of these slides that relate to a different type of form that will help denote to you what is the timing of that form. So for the family roster, you're documenting this at enrollment or intake, whatever the term is that your site uses. And it's meant to be both a family enrollment and the enrollment of each of those caregivers and target children that you're serving. So they may not all enroll at the same time. Certainly going to fill one out at enrollment of the family, and then if additional caregivers come in or additional children are born, you would be adding those. So the next form is the family roster update. So this is somewhat similar to the family roster, but it needs to be updated on a kind of periodic basis, and to capture changes for family members who have previously enrolled. So if their insurance status changes, if their schooling changes, if they enter or leave school, if they have a change in marital status, if they have a change in employment, those sorts of things. And the timing of that from the federal perspective was to collect that any time that the home visitor becomes aware of changes in status of any enrolled members of the family. We have been kind of thinking about this one heavily and the burden that it could place on you given different families where they may be changing employment very frequently. So we wanted to talk with you just for a couple minutes about what it would look like in two different scenarios. One would be entering things as they are updated, so whenever an update happens, or if you think that that's too perhaps challenging, which is what we're kind of concerned about for you, to the feasibility of perhaps just in every 3 months, make sure that updates have been reflected at that time. So in terms of kind of the changes of these sorts of things for your family, do you have some initial kind of thoughts on the feasibility of updating these kind of as they happen, or collect similarly accurate data if you were looking just potentially once every 3 months, making sure that at some point in that 3-month period you had updated it? And perhaps it'll help if I go to the form itself so that you can see the type of things that it does collect. This is the second form in your packet. So it starts with the family doctor update, an update on the family level information, you know, the number of adults, the average monthly income, and it goes into updates for each of those family members.
So this is Kim at Genesee. For all, we're hoping you're going to number these forms.
Yes, I noticed that when I opened it up. We didn't put numbering in this file. Would it be helpful to you when the forms are also separated? Because in the file that I sent you, they were all together. There wasn't a file for each of those particular forms.
Yeah, that was a little confusing when we printed them, and then I was trying to sort them because I just printed enough for each of us, and then I was in here trying to collate them, so that wasn't a good idea. But yeah, we were just kind of thinking just cuff because of course we haven't started using these yet. But this just looking at it, it probably would be easier every 3 months.
Okay.
That's just us coming up with it right now. It's, but you know.
Yeah. Okay. So for in Saginaw, do you feel the same way, or do you feel like updating as it happens would keep on top of it?
This is Ingham. We should be just updating it monthly. I think if we were to do it with every single change, I think there would be multiple updates. I feel like for some of our families. So maybe even just updating it monthly would work best.
This is with Saginaw. We're kind of agreeing with every 3 months.
Okay. So Kelly, would a 3-month interval work for you at Ingham, or would you prefer to do it every month?
3 is fine. I mean,
okay.
I just don't. We think it'll work best with every, you know, as soon as they make a change to have to update it every single time. So yeah, 3 months is fine.
Okay.
And this is Mary. I think, you know, one of the goals, as Brenda mentioned, for the federal reporting, one of the goals is to minimize the missing data. So what they're hoping to do is catch and update kind of as frequently as it occurs, but without being that burdensome of every week changing and changing. So it could also be up to the discretion of the site, you know, given the families you see, how frequently it makes sense for you to check in with them to make sure that you do catch an update that's happening, but without it being a you know, revisit burden that you have to take with you. I'd like to point out on this page while we're here is, for the most part, all of these fields are also on the enrollment form, so they're updated as they happen. With the exception of this really unique question that Brenda's filling down here at the bottom, there's a lot of text and one little checkbox. So I'm going to take a minute to dwell on this, a little bit about it. One of the things that they're looking to collect is the number of people who, at any time that they're getting services, any time that they're with you, have 6 continuous months where they have health insurance. So there's a way to collect it. You could have asked at every visit, can you report? Another way to ask is there any time where they don't have it? But the best way to capture the largest number of people that this possibly applies to is this quirky question we have in here. So the behind this question is that once somebody who's been in your program has 6 continuous months of health insurance, box would get checked. First time that could ever happen was when somebody reaches 6 months service or post-enrollment, 6 months. And then obviously it could change there on out. It might happen until they reach 11 months or 12 months. Maybe 12 continuous months. But once you check the box, it is important that we do not uncheck it. It is the one concept that doesn't reflect where they're at right now. It just reflects something that has happened since they've come to see you. So it's a little, it's very unique. It's the best way we thought of capturing that item they're requesting from us.
Questions on that one and how you might determine whether to mark it or not? Okay. Along in the update form, just as with that family roster enrollment form, the family update form, as Carrie said, includes many of the same fields with the exception of that insurance box down at the bottom. So there is also a page for the additional caregiver and then pages for the index children being served. Do you have questions on the update form? I know to take in at once. So again, if you have questions and after we leave the webinar today, just shoot Carrie or I an email or call us and fill the forms with you. For the next form that we'll look at, let's get back to the slide, kind of giving the overview of what this is, the family home visit log. So one of the changes with the new benchmarks is more timely information. So HRSA is wanting to get closer to very accurate with different points in time what's happening. The home visit log is meant to capture a record of visits that occur during a specific time period. The dates were not concerns regarding the children's development, behavior, or learning, and something that is intended for you to document each home visit until the program exit. And you'll see when we get to the form that this is also split into kind of 3-month chunks. So there's 3-month windows here. So go to the home visit log. The instruction at the top that a new visit log should be completed every 3 months for each of the families that you have enrolled. You should continue to do that until the family exits. And for the log that you'll be keeping here, it's looking for dates associated with the log time frame. So what is the 3-month period? And breaking down where that is in their enrollment. So is it enrollment up through 3 months? Is it 4 months to 6 months? Is it 7 months to 9 months, etc. So for the vision is kind of for when these papers live in your file, have one of these boxes checked, and then you'll enter this information, visits that are completed within that time period. And this is one of those situations where HRSA had asked for a specific question to be answered, and the only feasible way that we could determine to get the information that they were looking for was to have it be asked at the do you have any concerns regarding the children's development, behavior, or learning? And this is a question that you would ask of the parent when they're home. So I should clarify that because I wasn't clear my language earlier. This is one of those things that they still want to be asked directly of the family. So log is pretty simple after that. Once you check which 3-month window this is, you're going to be putting in the home visit date and then asking the question and marking, do they have concerns? No, if they don't have concerns, or not asked at this visit if you didn't ask the question at that visit. There are many, many, many spots there for logging of home visits within a 3-month period, and the data system itself will be built out for many spots there. It's pretty straightforward just in documenting whether or not the question was asked and whether or not they have concerns. Any questions on the home visit log form? Okay. And again, the home visit log should be documented at every home visit, and it's really just asking that one question. The child health and pregnancy log is the next one in the packet that was sent. And we're asking for documentation of an individual log for each of the index children. And what it's going to cover is pregnancy status of the primary caregiver, postpartum visit date, breastfeeding, well child visits, emergency room visits. And the when you're going to collect this is doing updates and events for each of those children being served, and with the start of any subsequent pregnancy. So if you enroll mom with 1 or 2 children and then she has a subsequent child, you would complete a form for that child as well. Itself looks like that. I'll do it in the full form here. The maternal child health and pregnancy log, you'll see up here at the top it says index child 1. But again, you would be completing one with each child. Information will be the same. The PCID, PC name, that sort of thing are probably consistent. Mom's going to be the same across those kids. But then we do questions that are specific to that child. So when did the caregiver become pregnant for this index child? Were they born before they enrolled with your program, pregnant at enrollment, or the pregnancy began after enrollment? They were a subsequent child. The ID, the child's proper name. If they're not born, then their anticipated delivery date, their date of birth, and there's a question about postpartum visit. We would complete this section if mom enrolled prenatally or within 30 days of the index child's birth, just to note the date of that postpartum visit. If they have a postpartum visit, then you would check any mom did not receive a postpartum visit. The next one is on breastfeeding. Did mom initiate breastfeeding? The date that they received food other than breast milk, the date that they stopped breastfeeding, and if child received breast milk at each of the following ages, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 6 months, 12 months. So this is a little different way of looking at breastfeeding than was previously done on the caregiver interview forms. It's focused on, was any breastfeeding complete versus, previously collection of exclusive breastfeeding. Are being more specific about and at what points in time the child may still be receiving breast milk. The next section of the form is on well-child visits, and it's asking for you to enter information for all well-child visits, along with the AAP periodicity schedule after the child's age at enrollment. So you're going to mark if the visit was missed or if they were not yet enrolled at that point. So they're not really something that you could answer. And the last piece here is emergency department or emergency room visits. It's looking at non-fatal accident or injury that occurred after the date of enrollment. And to check if the child's never been to the emergency department or emergency room for a non-fatal accident or injury. But then it's just a series of dates. So we're recording just the date, not the type of incident as was previously recorded, but just the date.
Well, this incident is somewhat implied, just in that the only ER visits we want are ones that are for non-fatal accident or injury. So an illness type visit is not one that needs to be or would be appropriate to document here. So hopefully that will help eliminate the need for trying to list out all of the dates. We only need you to list the ones that they're asking for us to report on.
And you would be completing this form for index children who are being served. Questions on any of the sections on this form?
Brenda, I have a question. So we only typically enroll one child, and once that child is old enough and exits from our program, if there's a younger sibling, then we will then at that time enroll younger siblings. Do we need to fill out the additional index children information for the other kiddos in the home that we are not serving?
One question.
Excellent question. And this is one of those wonderful areas where HRSA has been evolving. The way that it's currently being interpreted is that an index child is defined by your model and your agency. So if you're serving only that older kiddo, then that is your only index child to be reporting on until the other child comes around, and then you would add them to the family roster and begin documenting for them. There is currently a concept circulating about families that are touched by monies and kind of how to define the additional families and in some sense the additional children that are served, even if it's indirectly. So the possibility that this definition could eventually impact the way we define an index child, but at the moment it's defined by your model. So if enrollment multiple births mean multiple index children, then all of those children would be considered index children. But given the definition you've just provided, for that case, only the oldest child would be your index child until the other event occurs, if it were to occur.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions on the maternal child health and pregnancy laws? Okay. So the next piece is the ASQ3 screening log. So with the new benchmarks, the ASQ-SE is no longer required for reporting, so you won't see that here. But Carrie's doing a little dance, you can't see that. But the ASQ3 is still very much part of the documentation of screeners for child development that HRSA is asking for. With this, with the screening log, we're looking to document screeners and individual logs for all of the indexed children. To be recording the calendar age of the child at the time of screening, as well as the developmental age of the child at screening, because we know that that's an important differentiation for which of the screeners they will receive and the expectations are. The specific tool that was administered, the date and scores for the screening, and then a follow-up plan. So it's similar information to what we had collected in the past. I'm going to document each ASQ3 as they occur for each of the indexed children. For HRSA, at a minimum, they're looking at the 9, 18, 24, and 30-month time points. But for pretty much all of the models, you're asked to complete ASQ or some sort of developmental screening on a much more frequent basis. So you see when we go to the form that there's a little more space here than just those particular ones. Along in the packet to ASQ3 screening log. Again, it's specific to the child. It says index child 1 at the top. You'll record their ID, their proper name, their age in months at the time of the screen, and then the developmental age. So you're going to be using ASQ's conversion if the child was born premature to get that developmental age. Administered, which screener was administered, their scores for each of those 5 pieces, and then the follow-up plan. And for the follow-up plan, we're asking that you check all that apply because we know oftentimes you're doing multiple things to support that family. And the follow-up plan will also note if the scores were all in the normal range and there's nothing that needs to be done at this time, there's an NA option. There's provide individual developmental support. And to do that, there's a service referral log. Later we'll go through that you can record any of those referrals and such that you might do based upon a screener in that form. Early intervention services, we've got other community services. Monitor and rescreen. We know oftentimes, especially with the very young age screens, when you're doing them pretty frequently, kiddos can move around on their scales and parents reticent to do referral just based upon one screen. So it may be your plan to monitor that and rescreen. Sharing the results with a child's primary health care provider or another plan that you develop. We're asking that you check all that apply for that follow-up plan.
On this moment and dwell on the second response for follow-up plan. It doesn't look exactly like a referral. The 2 lower options beneath are direct referrals. The second option is to provide individualized developmental support. It's a really important option to take note of because the reporting is asking for out of children who did score with a delay, one of 3 things happened. Instead of just saying a referral, they're saying one of these 3 types of things can be considered the referrals, which are the 2 referrals refer to early intervention, refer to community services, and it also includes that second option that Brenda highlighted, the individualized developmental support. Not always think of that as a service referral. It might not be something you're naturally inclined to enter on to the service referral log, but the way to analyze that data and look at it is by linking the data found on the ASQ logs with the referrals that show up on the service referral log. And so the option to provide individualized developmental support is considered one of those referral options or follow-up plans. It's very important to make sure that that concept hops its way onto the service referral log, even though it might not be an intuitive link there. I just wanted to highlight that out for you because we'll really want to capture that.
And then additional spots on the form for subsequent ASQs. So just as with the initial one, you're going to mark the age of the child, their developmental age, their scores in the follow-up plan for each of the additional ones that you do for the child. You here on the paper form, again, these forms are meant to be the paper copies that reside with you. So you would be adding to this as you went along in services for the family. And the additional ones for the additional index children that you're serving as well.
We do a lot of slots. We want to make sure that if you were administering them, that they all made it. It looks like
I will get there in a second. Okay. Are there any questions about the ASQ3 log? Forward to the next one, which is a new concept that HRSA has kind of brought in, the early language and literacy concept. And this is a log of a specific question that they are having home visiting sites asked across the country. So the one here is documenting in an individual log for all of the indexed children. You're going to be recording the age of child when they enrolled at each home visit where that early language and literacy log is being documented. It's one question related to early language and literacy that gets at how often they are reading and singing to their child. When here is you're documenting for all indexed children, it's a prenatal enrollment. You're going to document for the first time when the child is 3 months old, and then 6, 12, 18, and every 6 months after that. For postnatal, with children who are older than 3 months, you're going to document at 3 months of enrollment in the program, 6 months, every 6 months after that. So with the log itself, again, it's based upon the child's age or post-enrollment intervals if they're already of age. They are enrolled in the program. The log itself, it is a question. So you have one of these logs for each of the indexed children, their ID, their name, to the home visit, and you checked in on this. And the question is, during a typical week, how many days do you or another family member read, tell stories, and or sing songs to the child? And then there are 7 options, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, for how many days of the week that is occurring on. That's it for that log. There's one each particular home visit date that could be there. But it's straightforward, just as the earlier kind of home visit log form was. With the other question, it's just one question that you're asking as much as you can. So at every home visit is HRSA's expectation, but definitely there were some critical time points that I talked about. So making sure that you're documenting it 3 months, 6, 12, 18, and onward. Do you have any questions about that particular log?
So I guess could you just clarify for us, we may need to do it at the month, 6 months, and then every 6 months, or we could document it weekly?
This is a unique one, and you've hit on the crux of one of the questions here, and that's that it kind of goes back to the HRSA looking to make sure there's no missing data. So, be asked, as soon as possible after the child's born or enrollment, and just after 3 months. You could ask every time. So when we pull the data for reporting and we go across each role, we'll want to make sure that within that reporting period, we'll pull the most recent documented results. So it means that the frequently you ask it, the more likely it is that we have something on record in a file. So if I had asked every visit and then said, well, whatever you can work with, so as long as there's never a missing data point here, we're okay with that. So we that 3 months and 6 months and 6 month intervals will help ensure that every child has something documented within each reporting period. This is something that as we see the completeness of the data, we revisit and think differently about how frequently it could be asked, hoping that asking at some point, you know, within the first 3 months and then those 6-month intervals will help make sure that every child has a data point to report on. I know that's a precise response to your question. At the moment we're thinking that at 3 months, at 6 months, and then the 6 months should capture that. But the more frequently you're able to capture it and document it, the more complete the data is, and you don't have to change and revise it.
Okay. Clears it up. Thanks.
Are there questions on the early language and literacy log? Another one of the new things that HRSA is asking for is the concept of capturing safe sleep practices. So there is a safe sleep log, and its code here is an info log for all of your index children that captures the age they were at enrollment in each home visit where safe sleep is being documented. And it asks a couple of questions that are related to sleeping habits. So when is documenting for children younger than 12 months of age? So once they reach, you know, a year of age, there's not as much concern about SIDS and only asking for, you know, children under a year to be, you know, documenting the safe sleep practices. If a prenatal enrollment, I want to document when the child is 3 months old, at 6 months, and at 12 months. If it's postnatal enrollment with children who are younger than 12 months, you can document within 3 months of enrollment and then again at 6 months of enrollment. For itself, again, you'll see the colored shapes here. It's documented based on the child's age or those post-enrollment intervals if they were already born at enrollment. And going to the form itself, the log, again, is specific to the child. So you'll have the child's ID, their name, their age at enrollment, the date of the home visit, and the child's age at the visit at which you're asking these questions. There are 3 questions. How often do you place the child to sleep on his or her back? Always, sometimes, or never. How often do you bed share with the child? Always, sometimes, or never. And how often does the child sleep with soft bedding? Always, sometimes, or never. And looking for those assessments at a few points in time.
So this is similar to the early language and literacy, and that HRSA started thinking, let's get it at every visit. And they backed off in response to the concerns, panic they had. And so they went back to, okay, you can ask a couple times a year. I think one of the first things to think about is that very first assessment. Phrasing you can see there below the safe sleep assessment when it's complete before the child is 3 months of age. So I believe as soon as you could grab that after birth, if they're, you know, a prenatal enrollment, that'd be ideal because then we know we don't have a missing data point for that child. We know that it's difficult to get all those things captured, especially in those time periods of people's lives. So, you know, we've said up to 3 months to try to give a window there. But as soon as you can capture one of those data points and get it on the form, the better and more complete than the report able to send in to show what you guys are doing.
Any questions on the safe sleep log? The next one is the Piccolo screening log. And just as a caveat, yes, I know you haven't been trained yet, so you're not using the tool yet because you don't have the tool yet. We are working on that for you. The materials for each of your sites have been ordered, and we're anticipating them to arrive any day here. So that is the cost that MPHI is doing, just as we supported you for the home. So. And I'm working with the state trainers to set up that training date for the Piccolo. Those are some steps coming, but once you have your materials and have your training, there is a screening log specific to this parent-child interaction. And you're going to document in an individual log for all of the index children. The Piccolo is a validated screening tool. So by popular vote, the home was given up, and you all voted to bring on the Piccolo. HRSA's requirement was just to have a validated parent-child instrument. We're hopeful that the Piccolo is much more useful to you than home was. And I'm excited for the fact that there's initial training for it to assist you in using the tool. You're recording the age of the child at administration, the date of the screening, and then the scores for each of the 4 domains that are on that instrument. You document this every 6 months when the child is 10 months old. So if you'll remember, the Piccolo is not validated for use until the child is 10 months of age. The child is already 10 months or at enrollment, you can start using it out of the gate every 6 months. If they are not yet 10 months old at enrollment, just like with the home, you'll be waiting until the child is old enough to use the tool and then doing it every 6 months after that. The log itself, it's set up similarly to the ASQ log, where you have, it's index child again. So you'll have one of these forms for each of the index children. The child's ID and their name at the top of the form. You'll have initial Piccolo screening, so that's going to happen when the child reaches 10 months of age if they're not 10 months of enrollment, or it will be, enrollment if they are already 10 months of age. The age of the child at the time of administration, the date of administration, and then the domain scores. So each of those 4 scores. And we have a series of entries here for subsequent Piccolo screenings. Once you get started, it will be every 6 months after that first one. Any questions on the Piccolo screening log? Okay. So this concept that HRSA has that's kind of new this year is this concept of tobacco use and exposure. So previously in the caregiver interviews, there were a couple questions about tobacco use. And then there was also the requirement to use a substance abuse screener. In FY17 forward, there's no requirement for reporting on a substance abuse screener. However, they're asking for more information about tobacco use and exposure, so not just the use of it by the caregiver. Looking at tobacco use for the primary caregiver and secondhand exposure in households for the children, the documentation, the results of that documentation, and a follow-up plan. It's documented at enrollment, at 6 months, and at 12 months, and as needed after 12 months post-enrollment. So just thinking about this concept the same way that we did in the past for the substance abuse screener. It would be, you're doing it at enrollment, 6 months, 12 are the required time points. So that it's kind of your judgment. If something has changed about that tobacco use or the exposure of the child, maybe another caregiver has entered the household who does smoke and use these products, so the child is now exposed. You'll want to update and document the changes there. So tobacco use and exposure log, start over to it. It logs the use and exposure. So you're going to have the primary caregiver information here, the enrollment tobacco use and exposure, and we're asking that you complete within 3 months of the date of enrollment. We have the date of documentation, the result, and there's a few options here. There was no tobacco or cigarette use exposure identified. PC is using tobacco or cigarettes. pregnant mother and or children are exposed to secondhand smoke in the house where they live, primary caregiver is using tobacco, cigarettes, and pregnant mother and or children are exposed to secondhand smoke. And tobacco use exposure is identified, but not through particular options and questions this time. Okay.
So this is another one as well where it's actually, HRSA's asked for this at enrollment. So see through the instructions, there's a couple different phrasing happening here. At the top, it'll say to be assessed at enrollment 6-12. In that first section, you can see the enrollment tobacco use says complete within 3 months. So the idea to capture as close to enrollment as you can, knowing it take up to 3 months to grab that information. But the closer you're able to grab it to enrollment, the more complete the data point is. Huzzah!
So the next piece here for each of these check-ins is the follow-up plan. And of course, there wouldn't be a follow-up plan if there's no tobacco or cigarette year exposure. There would be one if the caregiver is already receiving tobacco cessation services. And it wouldn't be a follow-up if the primary caregiver uses tobacco for traditional or ceremonial purposes only. So there's kind of an exception for that ceremonial purposes. Offer referrals provide information about tobacco use exposure, follow structured process, program, or curriculum for supporting tobacco cessation, or monitor and rescreen, or other. And check all that apply here if you're implementing multiple things. One thing to note on this form is there is a definition down at the bottom, because the definition surrounding what is described as tobacco products at the federal level has changed as different types of smoke apparatuses have come onto the market. There are a little bit, there are a few instructions down here on what would count. So as with caregiver interview, those e-cigarettes are going to come in here as well, even though it's not a traditional tobacco product. It's now under the federal umbrella of that. They're asking that you use the definition at the bottom when you're kind of evaluating the use and exposure in the home. And, Carrie noted there are a few time points here, the enrollment, the 6 month and the 12 months. And we have an additional. If, again, something changes in the home and you want to document and provide a referral or services at some point in the future beyond 12 months, we absolutely encourage that, and you can record that here. Do you have questions on the tobacco use and exposure log? Okay. The IPV screening log, so intimate partner violence screening log is still with us. This is a very important piece of the benchmarks and services. So it is very similar to what you've been doing in the past. What to be doing on this log is recording the date the screening was administered, the screening results, and then the follow-up plan. You complete and document the IPV screen within the first 6 months of enrollment. So it is just as it was before. Within the first 6 months, additional screenings based on your judgment and best practice recommendations after that. So the IPV screening log the PCID, the PC's name, a section for the initial screen, so the one that is done 6 months enrollment. So the requirement is that there's one done within that first 6 months. You record the date the screener was administered, the results, positive for possible IPV, negative for possible IPV, or not applicable. IPV identified, but not through the screening. So we learned from you that this is an important concept. So you may not always use this. There may be some other things happening that make it obvious. and you don't want to complete the screen at that time or it's not necessary, you would still want recording the follow-up, even if it wasn't identified through the screener. But this helps us to sort what's identified through screening or identified through another measure. The plan, we're asking that you check all that apply. There are a couple of NA options. So the first is the scores are in normal range. So it's not indicative of possible IPV, and not applicable for caregivers already receiving IPV services. A few follow-up options that are action options. So offering a referral that you would then record on the service referrals log, providing domestic violence information, creating a safety plan, or monitoring and rescreening. Or there may be some other intervention that you do with them. You record all of the ones that you are doing as follow-up to that screener. And to do additional screenings after that first one that's completed within the first 6 months of service, there is another spot for additional screening. And the questions are slightly different here in the header. A validated screening tool was administered, possible IPV was identified, but not through screening. There are two options there. So again, we're differentiating between IPV identified with the validated screening tool or IPV that was identified through a different path, but just as important to follow up on. The date that occurred, the results, and the follow-up plan, just as above. Do you have questions on the IPV screening log?
For using
broke up when you were asking your question. I didn't quite get the full question.
Oh, sorry. It says that we're going to be using the relationship assessment tool to screen for intimate partner violence, and we never used that tool before. Are you sure how to use that?
That's the one that has been supported by MDHHS, and they've offered training each year from the Futures Without Violence trainers. So many of the MHVI sites were using the relationship assessment tool, but there's no requirement that you use the relationship assessment tool, but you do have to use a validated screener. So like the HIT, I think the HIT is the only other one that I'm aware of, but it just has to be a validated screener for your population for interpersonal violence.
Thanks.
Okay. So out of curiosity for my own kind of information, which screener are you using?
It's the partner violence screen, the PS.
Okay. Yeah, so that one is a validated tool. Okay, excellent. So you're okay to continue using that one, the validated tool. That fits the requirement. Great question, though. Are there questions on the IPV screen log? Okay. So it says there are no other questions on that one, so we will move forward to the depression screening log. So that one, go back to our guidance slide. So depression screening log, as before, depression screening is required using a validated tool, but the timing of this has changed from what we've done in the past. So we'll walk through what that looks like. So here is essentially what you were doing in the past. So you're going to be doing depression screenings administered with a primary caregiver, but it has expanded to the male or female primary caregiver, whereas in the past there was a focus on the female caregiver. you're recording the date of the screening results, and then the follow-up plan, just as you did with the IPV screener. The depression screening, the timing, again, has changed. It's a little tight time frame than we had before. Previously, it was within 6 months. That has been reduced to 3 months. So if it's a prenatal enrollment, initial screen should be completed within 3 months of giving birth. If it's a postnatal enrollment, you're asked to screen within 3 months of that enrollment date. And as a past and as is best practices, additional screeners should be paid based upon your professional judgment, your agency guidelines, and so forth. But for the required reporting that we're assisting you with, we're asking for that initial screen to happen within 6 months, or within months. Oh goodness, 3 months. I have to get that through my head too. So it's screening within 3 months of giving birth, or within 3 months of enrollment if the child is already born. Depression screening log. Let me toggle to the form itself. So it has those instructions about the screening within 3 months of birth or screening within 3 months of enrollment. Then you're going to record the PCID or name. That's a section for that prenatal enrollment screener. So you're going to complete that section within 3 months of birth if it's enrolled prenatally. You're going to mark, yes, the screening was administered between 0 to 3 months after birth, or no, it was not administered between that time point. NA, the mom was enrolled postnatally, so this section would be applicable. The date the screener was administered, the screening results, positive for possible depression or negative for possible depression, and then the follow-up plan. So here's where you're going to record. It's not available, no follow-up is needed because scores are within the normal range, or the caregiver is already receiving mental health services, or you move into actionable items. So offering a referral, which you would enter into the service referral clause, deliver hands services, depression-related curriculum, monitor and rescreen, in the normal range, but you have additional concerns that you really feel should be followed up with. Share results with the caregiver's primary care provider or another follow-up action. If natal enrollment, you're going to complete the section down here where you're completing this within 3 months of enrollment because the baby is already born. To mark whether or not the screener was administered within that window, or NA to this section if mom was enrolled prenatally because she would have completed the section above. The screener was administered, and then the same screening result and follow-up plan as the prenatal one. And then spaces for additional screening. Just that PT. Do you have questions on this form, the maternal depression or depression screening? Moving onward to one that we're talking about kind of reference throughout because as needs are identified, you documenting follow up with the service referrals log. So this form is used to log each time the family as a whole or an individual family member receives a referral for services. And it's going to walk through who's receiving the services, the referral date and type. There is a set of codes for types of referrals, sure the referral and the family response to the referral, and then the services were received if they connected. You're going to be documenting this each time a family or family member receives a referral for services. So this is kind of very much a living that you're going into and making changes over time and adding to or recover responses as families do follow up on services or do not follow up on services. So this referral log, how to the form itself. So this is laid out as right. So it's capturing who will receive the service. So you're going to note whether it was a referral for the whole family. So maybe it's for, you know, a food basket at Thanksgiving. That's more of a family level referral. You would enter, you know, the family there. If it's specific to the child, if it's a referral based upon the ASQ or something else, you would note the child ID. Specific to the caregiver, perhaps interpersonal violence or tobacco cessation services, you would note the caregiver. The referral date, referral type, and there's a 2-digit code here. And I've got to go through all the options. So there are sets of referral codes that we're hoping will make it easier to kind of categorize things. So our developmental, healthcare, nutrition, DSS or Human Resources Administration, Family and Social Support Services, Employment Training Education, Counseling Support Services, Concrete Services, and other services. So anything else that didn't kind of fit into the other bucket. So there are some codes here to use with this form. Record that code here so that it's clear what type it is. The nature of the referral. Did the home visitor offer to make a referral? The home visitor provided the family with contact information, or the visitor supported the family in contacting the referral service. And then the family's response to the referral. So family not interested in referral at this time, family accepts the referral, or the family followed up on the referral. And have these services been received, yes or no? And then the initial receipt of service date. So something important to notice is these here, the family response to referral and have the services been received are steps that you're going to come back and update. So for each referral that you give, you're going to do an initial entry of the information through this column. And as the family perhaps moves along, so maybe they weren't interested the first time you said it, but a month later, they decide that they are and want to accept, you would go back in and change the check from this box to the family accepted. If they, you know, initially when you put the referral entry in, just because of the natural time that it takes, talking about a referral to actually receive the services, the first time that you go in and put this referral on a line, you're probably going to check no, that they haven't been received yet. But if they do connect with the services in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, you're going to want to go back in and change that no to a yes. So these two columns are asking you to update as, you know, progress is made with that referral, or kind of the discrete decision that, you know, this referral was opened 3 months ago, they haven't followed through. It's probably pretty clear that they're not going to, and you can close it out at that time.
Scroll down to the list of reasons for us again. I'm going to kind of revisit the idea about the developmental screening referral, just to kind of talk again about it and talk about it in the context of this service referral log. So in the text, we see options for developmental referrals, and there's 5 of them. The first 3 are in relation to findings from the ASQ screening. We know that sometimes you might make a developmental referral for other reasons. The fact that you don't have to document and send in the ASQ SE any longer, you might find that it's still an important screen for use at your agency, and so you find yourself, as Brenda highlighted, using number 4. So then you can still document a referral you've made based on the ASQ SE. You also want to document a referral for some reason outside of a screener that you found. And also the literary resources there is number 5. So just wanted to point again that there's the individualized developmental support, so the top one, which might not necessarily be a referral. It might be a decision by your agency to help serve them within your agency. The distinction there between referrals from the ASQ screening or action from the ASQ screening And then number 4, to document other types of referrals based on, or they might be the same type of referral, but from a different source.
Are there any questions on the service referrals log? There would be, because in the past, the service referrals has kind of been the hardest concept to encapsulate. So if you find as you start to use this that you have questions about where to code something or something not quite fitting, please, again, contact us because we can't update these things.
I have a question. This is Elizabeth with Oakland EHS.
Okay.
When working about, maybe I missed this, but there's one date, initially the referral date, and the nature of the referral, and then family response to referral. So we can change the family response to referral, update that referral date.
No.
So maybe a month or 2 or 3 in between all of that. So the referral and then the initial receipt of service date may be very far off. Okay.
Yes. What we want to be careful of is leaving things open forever. So, it's perfectly understandable that it may take 3 or 6 months to get some types of services. But at some point, you're going to want to come back and make sure that there's some closure to ones that there's been no movement on. And maybe it needs to be offered again, or maybe it was just something that the family was not interested in, and that's where it stops. Family was not interested, and the service hasn't been received.
Okay, thank you.
It's more a site-level process there in how you keep referrals open and when you determine to close them. There's no set time frame in which between the referral date and the receipt of service. It's kind of an open thing. We're just asking you to document when that occurs.
Okay.
Are there any questions on the service referral log? Okay. Our last piece here is the family exit. So this is going to be documenting the date the whole family exited. You're going to want to complete this only when all members have exited. You're going to record whether or not a transition plan was completed, and then the reason for exit. And with the reason, just as before, we're going to ask you only one reason, whatever that primary reason was. So here is completing again when the whole family exits the program. So you may have a caregiver leave, or you may have the initial index child graduates out and such, but you still leave the family open because you're still serving some of them. You don't complete this form until all the members of the family have exited your program. You're going to enter, if particular members exit before the entire family does, you're going to enter that individual exit information on that family roster update form that we went through a little bit earlier. With the exit, you're going to document this when the entire family closes out of services with you. Let me get to this form. You enter the family ID information, the date they exited, whether a transition plan was completed for this family, then the primary reason for the family's exit. And again, we're asking you to check only one. We've revised some of these based upon home visitor feedback and examples that we've gleaned from the HVOL system being used by HSA and the ETO system used by the NFP site. So we're hoping that these categories kind of pull in lots of things that were write-ins on the other line before. We're hoping that you use the other line as little as possible. You're able to to better categorize things. So you'll review each of these different options when thinking about what is the primary reason that the family exited. Unable to locate here is, I know for many families that is the reason that they exit, but there are also some gradations here on completion of programs, feeling like they received what they needed, but perhaps they didn't meet the program graduate requirements, but the family feels like they've received what they wanted. And I don't know, Carrie, do you want to talk about the bucket that this goes into for federal reporting? Because I think that description is helpful when thinking about how to categorize why a family is exiting into these different checkboxes.
Absolutely. There are 3 boxes that we turn all of these different responses into. One of them is completed the program. I know that completed the program has some variations on that. For example, looking at the top of this form, we have completed services. Met goals are there in that first checkbox. The third checkbox down is that they aged out. They've moved to the Head Start classroom. Maybe they started kindergarten. These are usually seen as successful completions. The children have moved on. Things that we group together in the completed services box. These boxes are stopped services and other. And in the HRSA has moved around how they thought of these a little bit. So moving forward, the stopped services tends to catch the majority of the responses that we see in the middle to the lower half of the form. The very bottom form is including some things that fall away into other. And the distinction there is that in other, it was impossible to provide some services to that family. We see there that perhaps incarceration or the loss of an individual in the family is going to make it so that they're no longer a family that's eligible for service. And stop services before completion is going to capture the majority of those middle responses who were unable to, they stopped service because they moved or they didn't want a new home visitor. So those are the 3 boxes that we find we have to sort everybody into. And the other reason why Brenda emphasized minimal use of the other. When something goes in other, we have to try on our end without knowing the family, without knowing the context of thing that happened with that family, trying to figure out which box they go in, and they often make their way into the stop services with completion. So it's the more information when you check one of the boxes, even if multiple boxes apply, it's wonderful for us if you're able to choose the box that is the most accurate description. And if that most accurate description is one of the ones that show that they completed services, it's a wonderful thing to document to show that like completed services, they get caught in one of the other boxes, like the other box.
Thank you. You're welcome. Are there any questions on the family exit form? Okay. And I would just underscore that you're not completing the family exit until every single member of the family has exited and you're no longer serving a member of the family. The exits for individual members would again go on that roster update form. Do you have any additional questions at this particular juncture? We've gone through all the forms, and I will, after the webinar, send out an email with a zip file of each of the forms separately so that's a little bit easier for you to save down. We just sent it out in one file today so that it would be kept in the order in which we were going to go through them, but I'll certainly do that. But do you have any questions for us at this point, given everything that we've just gone through with the forms?
So this is Genesee. The question that we have is about our current children. So how are we going to process that? Are we going to have a time period that we're going to our current children that we've had with the previous form in this new system, or what's the process with that?
I'm glad you asked this question because you led right into where I was headed after question.
Oh, okay, great.
Yes, this is an excellent question. Anyone who has served in this fiscal year, so anybody who didn't exit prior to the end of September, we will need to include in our reporting, or include in your reporting, and when we send all those numbers over. So we'll absolutely capture anybody who has not exited. I think the big question on the table that goes along with what you're asking is, what do we do about all of this historic data for those families, for events and enrollment information that relates to them prior to starting right now? And we're hoping to get a very clear, very specific response to you if next week when we do the next training about how to enter the data into the system, because they'll hand in hand with that, I believe. There are a good number of measures which require referencing either their enrollment data, when they first enrolled, even if it isn't in this fiscal year. One example of that is the education status. If an individual comes into the program with less than a high school diploma or no GED, they will always be part of our denominator for reporting on this school achievement measure. And so that enrollment status way back, whenever that was, it could have been last year or 2 years ago, will be a very important key point to document. The things we would like to do is highlight for you exactly which items would be needed so that you don't have to complete all of this paperwork, and you will need to submit all of the ASQs, for example, for a child who maybe has already received 2 or 3 or 4 over the past years. But there are some measures for which they'll ask in relation to the most recent event, which might have been last year, or things of that nature. So trying to sort through, out of all those items, exactly what we would need and to minimize that as much as possible. So I know your answer as of yet, but one is coming. But all the families will need to exist in the data system once we introduce that to you. Indeed. That all as a start, but it'd be helpful to probably begin documenting, the home visit dates that are happening starting October 1st for them, things of that nature. And getting an idea of what you might be doing in the next couple of weeks?
Well, this is a little bit of information, but we need, but it does begin to. So I think what we were talking about is just taking the form that has the dates on it and the question about behavioral health or behavior concerns and the literacy question, and maybe just putting it in our what we call a soft file that the home visitors use, and they're just going to take it with them on the home visits in the upcoming weeks, and they'll just start documenting that information.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Anything that happens starting October 1st will be, definitely important to have in the system. And then anything that you would need from before October 1st, we'll try and tell you here in the next week or two so they're able to have a little bit of time to collect that and move it onto your forms and into the electronic system. Are there any questions? So we're going to talk a bit about next steps. So moving forward, Carrie has touched on this a little bit. So we've got a couple weeks before the training on the online data system and entry of all of this information into it. So we had anticipated this time to be kind of some breathing space for you to absorb forms, review the forms with your staff who maybe weren't able to make it, or as a group, even if you're all on the line today. It's helpful to sit down and think about where is this information already gathered, or where are there places like Kim talked about with the particular specific questions on safe sleep and such that needs to be added to the files that you take out in the field. Thinking about those sorts of things would be incredibly helpful just to start thinking about that. Also, as you do that review, if you have questions, certainly ask us. This is a new process, not just for you, it's also for us. Your feedback is always really appreciated, and it's helpful to us in continuing to make things as useful and efficient as we can for the group. The next training is that in-person piece on November 3rd, and we're still working on the location for that, but it will be in Lansing, and I'll send out additional information. And for that one, we're asking that, and he'll be entering the information, be able to bring a laptop if they have it, so that we can sit you all and walk through the system and maybe have you test. So if you wanted to, in between, now and then, you could start practicing filling out the forms, or maybe take an old file and see how that information would fit into this as a way to identify where you already have this information. If you had some forms filled out, come to that in-person training. When you're coming to that in-person meeting, it would be good to have some forms that you could test. The next piece is, from MPHI, we're here for you. We're partners in this launch, trying to support you in getting this information distilled for that funding requirements that you have. One thing that we've talked about with a few teams, especially teams who are undergoing staffing changes, is once we've gone through maybe that Red Cap training in a couple of weeks, Carrie and I and potentially Sam could come out to your site if you're struggling with the concept through the forms or the system, and do some individual site level consultation. And then that piece on the Piccolo. So November 11th has been confirmed as the date with the trainers, and I'm seeking information from them on the timing of the training and such for that. And also getting clarification from the state as to, what the process is for staff members who aren't able to attend that November 11th date. It's on the table that there are future trainings that these trainers do around the state where staff members could pop in if they miss this initial one that's being offered at the home visiting fund. There are several pieces moving forward, but one that always finds us is I really encourage your questions as we launch into FY17 and getting this going. Take some time with the forms, review them. After the webinar, I'll send the forms out in separate files so that it's easier for you to save down. And we'll continue to talk and dialogue about the forms, about how they'll be used and how this intersects with the things that you are doing already. I'm trying to get out of that. MPHI staff contact information. So as we move into using a new system and a new way to support you in this data for your reporting, we're undergoing some structural changes on who's going to help where. But I, Brenda, will be with you to the end here as far as I know. So I will still remain your benchmark data and QI support person. Robin will still certainly be supporting you in that as well, but specific to these forms and this data collection system, Sam Jones, she's in London right now, hopefully enjoying herself deeply, and wasn't able to join us today, but Sam will be in fiscal year 17, be assisting you with the entry and rectification. So just as in the past when you submitted data, a review and cleaning process and we come back with questions, Sam is most likely going to be the person who's leading that with you and working with you on those. And then Carrie, our Fearless Data Systems person here, is working to get the final tweaks into building the system. So those systems level questions that you have, Carrie is an excellent person to reach out to. But at MPHI, there's not really a wrong door. You can contact any one of us with questions, and we'll make sure that it gets to the right person. We're a little bit early, but I'm not sure that that's a bad thing. If you have any questions, again, let us know. I'm going to offer one last opportunity on the line here. Do you have any other questions as you think of the forms and the next steps that I just went through?
This is Chandrika from Genesee with Parents as Teachers. You mentioned for the intimate partner violence screening, the relationship assessment tool, a PVS, and then you also said another validated screener. Can you tell me what the name of it was? I think it was HIT or something like that.
Yeah, it's called the HIT, HITS, and it's very short. I have 4 questions. It's not a long one. The partner violence screen is also short. The relationship assessment tool, the RAP, is the one that, if you're familiar with the national organization Futures Without Violence, it's that they train on and they support. So if you go to their website, they have lots of information on that and lots of resources. And that's one that the state has supported in the past. It seems with the switch to different data stems for the other types of home visiting programs, the relationship assessment tool may not be as common as it has been across the site. The state is looking at where they are in supporting a particular IPV screening tool versus allowing sites to use. So at this time, Chandrika, you're really, as long as it's a validated interpersonal violence tool that works with your population, that's all that's being asked. So you can choose any one that's validated that works with your population. And if you don't have one in mind already, thing that the MHVI sites did in the beginning was ask your local domestic violence service providers what screens they might send. That they're a great resource and are generally a great resource for training as well for your staff. And there's also a list that HRSA has for the MHVI site. So your particular site is not MHVI, but HRSA does have a list of validated tools that they put together kind of in the beginning as a menu of options for sites. I can forward that to you as well if you're interested in exploring those options.
Oh, sounds good. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And Jika, the violence training toolkit from Futures Without Violence, and when you're here next week for the social LLG meeting, I'd be happy to share that with you, and it's got the relationship assessment tool in it.
Great. I was just sending you an email saying which one do you use. Thank you.
That. I have the whole training and the whole kit, and we have done that training in the past. So
okay,
we can
perfect.
share that with you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bring resources with one another is awesome. Are there any other questions from the group online? With that, I would say, just take the forms, review them, think about them, ask us questions if you have them. I'll send out the forms in separate files for your ease of use going forward. And, be in touch if you have any questions, and I'll be following up with not just the separate forms, but also with the information on the 2 upcoming trainings. With that, I believe we have concluded everything we had to cover today. So you have some found time here, and we encourage you to go forward and use it or in relaxation and celebrate. To have all of you here, to be here with you today.
How are you?
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.